Pastor Wilder, thank you so very much for making time to talk with me. Thought it was incredibly important to, have this conversation with you about Fred Shuttlesworth and the contribution that he made to the city of Birmingham, District 4, and really the nation, especially with everything that we have going on in our country today. We have racial upheaval, we have distrust or lack of faith in our government, and really just a need to know about our history and to really gain inspiration from who we are as a people. And so if you could just kind of tell me, like, what are some of the things that you feel like, made Fred Shuttlesworth who he was, and,
I think that the two really important things about him that need to be brought to the forefront. First is that he was doing what he absolutely thought was right in the sight of God. He was not trying to get staged. He was not trying to be famous. He was not trying to organize and lead a movement initially. His goal was to do what he thought was right in the sight of God. And he would tell me, I pastored him the last several years of his life. I knew him much longer than that. But, he would read the Bible and he would see that God made all men, that God, out of one blood, God made all men. Mm-hmm. And he really believed that. He sincerely believed that. He was not somebody who was trying to capture somebody else's agenda and run with it. This is what he really believed in his heart. The second thing he really believed in his heart, he believed that it was God's will for him to do that. Mm. He really believed that. He believed that it was God's will, not only that it was right, but that God had called him to do that. And when that first bomb occurred and he did not have any injuries, then I think that solidified the thought that God has saved me for this purpose. Right. And from that point on, he went after it. I mean, he really went after it. I guess if I were to add a third thing, he was really convinced about nonviolence. Mm. If I may, I'll tell you a little story.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right after he was beaten at Phillips High School for trying to enroll his students, trying to enroll his kids, he checked himself out of the hospital. He had his arm in a sling. He's got these bruises all over him. He comes to a mass meeting that night, and the people that he came to were very hot. They were mad because they knew what had happened to him. Mm-hmm. And they were ready to set this city on fire. They really were. And he asked them two questions. First question he asked was, how many of you were beaten today? The first question was, are you angry? And they, of course, the stupid question, yes, we're angry. You went there nonviolently, you were dressed in your Sunday best. All you were trying to do is do what the Supreme Court years later had said was legal. Okay, you can go to any school you want. So when he asked if you're angry, not the mob, but the crowd said, yes, we are angry. The second question he asked was, how many of you were beaten today? And of course, everybody got quiet. And the point he made was this, and he said this almost verbatim: if I'm the only one that's been beaten, and if I'm not angry, nobody in this crowd has a right to be angry. Mm-hmm. And then he said, if one window is broken tonight, in the name of the movement, I'm going to consider what you did as a strike against the movement. Now go home. With that, they dispersed, went home. And that's how Birmingham was saved. They were going to tear this place up. Wow. They were going to tear this place up. Because all he was doing was what the Supreme Court of these United States said he could do. Yeah. Take his kids to any school and enroll them. Yeah. He did not go there with machetes or machine guns or bricks or anything else. He went as a law-abiding citizen and was attacked by a mob for trying to enroll his kids in school.
That is crazy.
So when I think about that, and when I look at all that he endured for the cause, and the fact that he didn't hate anybody, mm-hmm. and he said he didn't hate Bill Clinton, he felt sorry for him, but he never hated him. Mm-hmm. Never hated him. Until the day he died, he was just pleasant. Man loved to laugh, loved to clown around, but never hated him.
I feel like that takes a different type of, self-awareness. You really have to be aware of self, right? And aware of your purpose to be able to face certain things like that and not get angry and act out in such a way that is violent, right?
I agree. I would probably put it in a spiritual, my preacher term. I think you need to be sure that God has called you to do this. Because if not, people will pull stuff out of you.
Right.
They will provoke you. They will push you to a point. Unless you know this is what God has called me to do. And if God has called me to do it, then God will protect me. And I think that's the vantage point that he had that a lot of other people didn't have. He knew, he was convinced that he was not going to die. Mm-hmm. He was convinced that God had saved him. He was convinced that God had called him to do this. And so that's why he did it. He pushed. And he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. I like to describe him as non-violently confrontational. He was committed to nonviolence, but he was very confrontational.
Yeah.
He would stand up in the face of anybody and say that this is wrong in the sight of God, or this is wrong in the sight of the law. And not back down and not back down.
What do you feel like was, I guess, fueling his persistence? Because, after a while, you get to a point where you just like, all right, ain't nothing moving. Like, nothing is happening. I keep getting, beat. My house has been bombed. I know for a fact that, I prayed, I'm moving on, God's word. But I don't see any results. Like, I'm being nonviolent. I'm trying to walk in love. I'm trying to, give people grace, and I'm not seeing any results. And like, how do I continue to just push?
His motto was, and he said this on numerous occasions, I'm either going to kill segregation or be killed by it.
Wow.
The difference between he and Dr. King, and I have the vantage point that I pastored Reverend Shuttlesworth and spent a lot of time talking to him, so he would be very reminiscent a lot of times. But the difference between he and Dr. King was a negotiator. Fred Shuttlesworth was not. There was no negotiation. Mm-hmm. One of the times that Reverend Shuttlesworth ended up in the hospital, there was a boycott, a selective buying campaign. I can't use the term boycott. There was a selective buying campaign. Mm-hmm. And when Reverend Shuttlesworth went to the hospital, Dr. King got with the other businessmen, and he had Reverend Shuttlesworth wanted 7 things. Dr. King agreed to somewhere between 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly, 5 or 6 of them, and said, we'll call the boycott off. Somebody went back and told Reverend Shuttlesworth, now he's in the hospital. He checks himself out of the hospital, goes, find Dr. King, and says, this is my movement. You don't call anything off. It doesn't stop until I say it stops. And the boycott is still on until I get everything on. That was Reverend Shuttlesworth. There was no gray, right, black or white, right, left or right. That was the way it was. And that was the difference between he and King, and that's one of the things that caused a little bit of a friction between the two of them. Right. Because, Dr. King wanted to pontificate and give all these flowery words. And Shuttlesworth would say, look, man, all those flowery words ain't get nothing done. We need to meet with direct action.
So action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. It sounds like, Fred Shuttlesworth was somebody who was a man of conviction.
Absolutely.
Who made decisions of quality and was just fully committed to whatever he put his mind to. I'm curious, well, I'm not even curious. I just know learning about his story, learning about him is something that, a lot of people need to know. A lot more people need to know, especially our younger generation, because I believe that we need to see more figures or learn about more people who weren't afraid to stand up against all odds, right? They weren't, people who were breaking the law per se. And I say that loosely because in a sense he did have to break laws, but the laws were unjust. But he was somebody who, like I said, moved with conviction, treated people right, but was very serious about freedom. What advice would you give to young people, right, that have a desire to be a leader in their community, but have received, pushback from those who are much older and, more experienced? Because I know Fred Shuttlesworth, he was, 30 years old when 30 years old when he, started pastoring his first church. Most people would say that's too young. Like, what you know about pastoring at the age of 30, But what advice would you give to young people who, like I said, have a desire to lead, but may not, receive that same encouragement, from those who came before them?
The very first thing I would say is to be informed.
Okay.
Learn the law. Learn the Constitution. Read everything you can read. Find out what's really going on. Because what you see in the newspaper sometimes, or what you hear on TV, or what the spin is at the barbershop, may not be accurate.
Right.
Understand what's going on. Know the law. From that, be fully convinced in what you're doing. I think that's very important, because if you're scared, if you're in a crowd demonstrating and you're scared, and somebody does something, then you're going to react adversely. So be convinced of what you're doing. The third thing is fit in where you can in terms of helping the process. Now, let me say that and then add this as a way of a semi-confessional. I never marched. When it was important, let me say that. I marched symbolically, but when it came time to demonstrate, I never demonstrated. But in a lot of boardrooms, in a lot of corporate environments, in a lot of other situations, I was the one that was fighting. I didn't wear my watch, but I have a watch that was given to me by some of the employees where I used to work when I retired. And they gave it to me because, in their words, I was the one that sort of fought for them to have an opportunity to come. Now, there needed to be somebody in the street marching. There really needed to be somebody there. But there needed to be somebody in the corporate boardrooms when people's hearts were at least sensitized to what was going on. There needed to be someone to fit in right there and say, okay, this is where we go from here.
Right.
This may be before you were old enough, but there was a situation here when the PGA was coming to Shoal Creek. I don't know if you remember that. And there was a lot of turmoil that was generated because Shoal Creek had an exclusionary policy that omitted blacks. When Hall Thompson and the board finally decided we're going to admit blacks, I don't know if you remember, there was a mass scramble to find somebody who could meet the requirements and who had the money. So there was a need for both people. There was a need for people to bring that issue to the forefront. But then once we say, okay, you need to hire black surgeons. Somebody's got to be a black surgeon to step in. So there's some of our young people that may not feel comfortable, or their parents may not feel comfortable with them out in the street. But wherever you are, if you're in the corporate environment, if you're in the business environment, if you're in an organization, maybe you don't march, but when somebody's heart is sensitized, then that's your opportunity to step in. And you can't feel condemned because you were not out in the streets. You have to stand up when it's time for you to stand up, and when your time is up, when your hour on stage is there, you have to take full advantage of it. You have to do that. Yeah. And again, I think that is just as important Adam Clayton Powell probably did not march. But when they went to court, who was there? Adam Clayton Powell. He was there. He took the baton after the first people ran the first leg. Okay? He got people in the door. Now, the people that got in the door, they have to run a leg too. And that is, first, they have to be competent. They got to do their job. But then also, you need to start training somebody who may look like you to come after you to take your place. You can't say, I'm here, I'm the only one, I'm the greatest, I'm the only one. No. You are there to hold a place and to train somebody else coming after you. That's your job. It can't be, I'm the only one that made it, I want my name to go down in history. You have to train a successor. You have to breathe into somebody coming along after you. Breathe into them your life. You have to let them know what they need to deal with, how they need to prepare themselves, what they're going to face. You have to help them not only become competent, but also to get that mindset. Because to be in politics takes a certain mindset. It takes a certain mindset. You can't just be flippant. You can't just go off at the mouth. You can't just satisfy the loudest few and leave the vast majority of the silent people out there to fend for themselves. You have to have that mindset. Well, nobody tells you that when you're running. You have to have somebody to sort of show you the ropes. You have to have somebody to tell you, you need to watch out for these lobbyists or these people or whatever else. And don't get yourself in this situation. Don't get pain in the box. All those kinds of things are important. And yet, they don't get the glamour as the people who were out there marching get. But yet, if they're not ready to go when the camera lights are on, then it's not going to make a difference. All their marching is in vain if there's not somebody who can step in and take it from that point forward.
So everybody plays a part.
Everybody plays a part.
And everybody has to, really see the value
True.
in what they bring to the table.
True. And let me answer, and not criticize somebody else.
Yeah.
Don't criticize a man in the street.
Yeah.
Man in the street is making a way for you to sit up in your corporate office. You don't criticize him. You help him in any way you can.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gaston, there's a film down at the Civil Rights Institute, the clip, where he's talking about the fact that basically he didn't march, but when Shuttlesworth and all those guys got in trouble, they came to him and he had to write the checks. Yeah. So, yeah, he didn't march, but he played just as an important part.
Yeah.
His part was just as important. And people who march in the street shouldn't criticize him because had he not written them checks, they still been in jail.
Yeah.
So, let's stop this bashing somebody else because whatever. Even now with the police, we may talk about things with the police, but when they ask, are there any people of color who want to be police officers? We all can't take one giant step backwards. Somebody has to step forward, knowing that you're going to be criticized, knowing that your life is going to be on the line, knowing that you're going to be misunderstood. But somebody has to step forward. Yeah. We can't say we want better police and then nobody wants to step forward. Somebody's got to do it. Same thing we start off our conversation talking about children. Well, we can say how bad the children are, but are you willing to get involved to help those kids? Somebody's got to be out there. Yeah. Somebody's got to be a Boy Scout leader. Somebody's got to coach baseball. And no, it's not going to be convenient. And no, you may not even get paid for it. But somebody's got to do it. Yeah. Somebody's got to be there. Yeah. And somebody's got to do it. And if we don't, or until we do, we have no right to criticize.